This is Bloomberg Surveillance Early Edition with Danny Berger and Kriti Gupta.
It is 10 a.m. in London, 5 a.m. in New York, 5 p.m. in Hong Kong. Our top stories today. Nvidia soars, the chipmaker at the heart of the AI frenzy, gives a bullish revenue outlook but warns that any stricter rules on exports to China will hurt US companies in the long term. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the man who led a mutiny posing the biggest threat to President Vladimir Putin's almost quarter-century rule, is presumed dead. In a fatal plane crash, we get reaction from Belarus's opposition leader. And in a debate last night, Republican presidential candidates were largely unified in their criticism of President Joe Biden's economic record, but sparred over foreign policy, the border, and abortion rights. Welcome to Bloomberg Surveillance Early Edition. I'm Tom Mackenzie, stepping in for Danny Berger in London, with Kriti Gupta, of course, for us in New York. And Kriti, the dynamo around AI continues for these markets.
And powering a lot of the markets, not just here in the States, but around the world. You are seeing a major move into really all the tech names. I would argue a fairly broad rally as well. Just take a look at what the S&P 500 is doing right now. In terms of futures action, higher by 0.6%, 44.74 for those contracts for our radio audience. But the real outperformance, like I said, is in that tech space. You can see it in two ways. Stateside, the NASDAQ 100 futures outperforming by a massive margin, 1.2%. Tom, we were talking about this yesterday, just how much kind of impact do you see in terms of front-running this move versus piling in after Nvidia reports the results. It looks like it's the latter. Hang Seng Index as well overnight, getting a big boost from that investment as well, higher by 2%, really kind of giving a little bit of a boost to a market that has seen an exodus of floods. And of course, a quick check on the 10-year yield, kind of unchanged right now, but 4.18 on that. It feels like the shift and the focus is going to kind of turn to Jackson Hole now that Nvidia is in the rearview mirror, and that of course is going to put a spotlight on the bond market. But let's get a quick check on those Nvidia shares, because again, it is the market story of the morning. Green on the screen, higher, Tom, by 8% in morning trade.
Really, really fascinating, that $25 billion buyback, and no concerns, at least at this point, around being able to meet and match that demand. You talked about the bond markets, and rightly so, Kriti. There's a bit more action, it has to be said, in Europe and in the UK, where money continues to move into gilts as markets continue to price in maybe a slightly less hawkish BOE. Yields coming in on the 10-year here, the gilt currently at 4.4 on the UK 10-year. And we bring back to the technology story as well, because, of course, the tide that lifts all boats, at least when it comes to Nvidia, and at least for today, because the tech sector in Europe is getting a boost as well. The likes of ASML, that Dutch-listed company that makes the lithography machines that go into the foundries of TSMC and Samsung that churn out these chips, that company is getting a lift, as is STMicro over in France, Infineon in Germany as well. The index currently gaining 1% when it comes to semiconductors and tech here in Europe. Broadly across the benchmark, still gaining gains of about 0.5%. The optimism had come off a little bit. You saw stronger highs at the start of the session, but we are still on track, Kriti, here in Europe for a fourth straight day of gains.
Well, a lot to digest in the market space, but also, I have to say, in the geopolitical space as well. Of course, we talked about the debates and the headlines there, but there's a lot going on the other side of the Atlantic. The man who launched a failed mutiny against Vladimir Putin, Yevgeny Prigozhin, is presumed dead. Russia's aviation authorities say he was in a plane crash northwest of Moscow that killed all 10 aboard. Now, a warning, the video we're about to show you is quite graphic. This is unverified video coming from Russian media outlet TASS. Prigozhin led an aborted mutiny in June against Putin, his biggest threat to an almost quarter-century rule in that nation. No cause has been given for the crash at the moment. Bloomberg's European correspondent Maria Tadeo is all over that story. She joins us now for the latest. Maria, some really interesting developments here. Put us into context. What are you hearing from your sources?
Well, Kriti, we should go back to yesterday in the afternoon. That's when the Russian Aviation Authority put out this alert that a plane had crashed going from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Then after, it was followed by further information that on the list of passengers, it appeared that Prigozhin was in it, and now he is presumed dead this morning. No reason has been given for this crash. It is being presented as a plane crash. An investigation will presumably take place. A black box has not been found for this. We should also note that Prigozhin himself, who is from St. Petersburg. He has both personal and commercial links to Moscow and St. Petersburg. It is not unusual for him to be flying on a private plane, but as I say, no comment yet on what led to this crash, and no comment from the Kremlin either. We should note, and again, not getting into too much of speculation, but we should note this, there is a history now and a proven track record of critics and individuals that went against Vladimir Putin and then ended in situations that resulted either in serious injury or, in this case, death.
Maria, as we remember specifically from 2 months ago when the coup first happened, Prigozhin had this massive notability for creating or kind of protecting Russia's interests outside of Russia. What happens to those operations?
Look, that's a big question. Well, it is a big question. Also, we should point that in the 2 months that you alluded to when that coup, that insurrection happened, it ended with allegedly a deal that was cut between the Russian president, the head of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, and Prigozhin. It was understood that he would go to Belarus, head into exile, and that would forgive his life. That was in theory. 2 months later, of course, what we find is that he has died in a plane crash. Now, in terms of the operations for Wagner, we should also note that after the coup, it was made very clear by the Russian government that Wagner would cease to operate as it had, as a mercenary group, that it would be inserted into the Russian army. Again, there had been a very public power struggle between Wagner and the Russian army. It seems that in this case, it is the Russian army now that has been reinforced and won this power struggle. In terms of the operations of Wagner in Africa, that is also an interesting component here, because remember, just a few days ago, Prigozhin was pictured at a Russia-African leaders summit, and these operations, we should note that both the United States and the European Union say that Wagner has played a role in destabilizing countries in Africa through its military arm.
Really fascinating. And as you say, the optics of seeing Prigozhin there with African leaders. And we're talking of today, of course, about BRICS and that summit there. We know that, of course, Putin couldn't travel because of the ICC, the potential arrest warrant, the international arrest warrant for the Russian leader. You, of course, are very well sourced when it comes to Ukraine. What is your sense from Ukraine as to the reaction there to these developments?
Yes, and, one of the fundamental things here is that I don't believe they think this will change much in the situation on the ground in Ukraine, because, of course, we already know that in many ways Wagner was dismantled and that Prigozhin had been removed from the operational side of things in Ukraine. For them, it's more about the politics of this. They say if you believe there was a deal and 2 months later he is dead, these are the same people, the same kind of Russian establishment that we're supposed to get around a table and negotiate a lasting peace deal that tells you everything you need to know. I think beyond that, when you look at the BRICS today, the optics of the summit, as you say, Vladimir Putin was supposed to go to South Africa. The BRICS takes the name after Russia. He was not able to go because of this international arrest warrant. Today, the BRICS extending invitations and saying they provide a way forward for other countries, but this is where we are today with Prigozhin presumed dead.
And I think we're going to follow up with this. We've got a really important interview lined up that you've lined up for us. The Belarusian response to this, or at least one side of the Belarusian response to this, Maria. So I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom. And now we are joined by Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, who, of course, has been leading the Belarusian opposition now for years against Alexander Lukashenko. And Sviatlana, I want to ask you just very frankly, when you heard the news yesterday, what was your initial reaction?
Actually, it wasn't a surprise for me, because the death of Prigozhin exactly 2 months after his march on Moscow is a very clear signal from the Kremlin against its domestic enemies. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, actually, because Putin's Russia behaves as a thug state where laws don't work, where everyone can be killed, poisoned or blown up. And it's plausible that Putin will continue cleansing from any alternative voice, and Russia will become fully a totalitarian state with a cult of Putin.
And can I follow up on this? I think you make it clear with the choice of words and language that you do not believe this was an accident. What you say is that the Kremlin's hand is behind this, and this was a message perhaps to the rest of Russian elites or potential opposition.
Of course, it's not a mistake or accident, for sure. It's a direct blow of Prigozhin.
And Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, obviously you have a track record now of opposing Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus. We should note that your husband is in prison and you had to flee the country for your life. I wonder, however, Alexander Lukashenko took a lot of credit for this deal. He said the reason why Prigozhin is here and Wagner has moved to Belarus is because I worked on this deal. It seems there is no deal. Prigozhin is dead. I wonder what kind of information, however, do you have about Wagner and this deal? Do you believe ultimately he was tricked to by Russia?
You know, I think that this case is a strong blow for Lukashenko. I think that he feels very fragile now because he is, in fact, was set up. He feels that he can be eliminated, same as Prigozhin, for example. The deal he reportedly broke didn't work out. So the death of Prigozhin destroys his image of a peacemaker and a deal broker who saved the Russian people. And his security guarantees were worthless. He was buying time for Putin to plan his revenge, actually.
Can I ask you, as a follow-up to that then, do you believe Alexander Lukashenko has reasons to worry? And we should note again, Vladimir Putin provided support after that election, which the international community was rigged. And one of the reasons why Alexander Lukashenko is still in government is because of that support from Russia. Do you believe that today he walks up as a puppet leader, perhaps?
Yeah, of course, Lukashenko now is on the leash to Putin. He's full accomplice to Putin, and he depends a lot on Putin's economical and political support. But again, you know, this situation with Wagner, with Prigozhin, showed to Lukashenko that he's under threat again, and this situation can bring military forces of Belarus to deconsolidation because they shouldn't be able to feel safe now.
And do you have any information? I know that you have said that you were worried about the implications of Wagner being in Belarus. We also heard from a number of Baltic leaders saying that they worried about that deployment in Belarus. What is the aftermath of this? If you believe that now the head of this group has been essentially assassinated, to quote you, by revenge from the Kremlin, are you worried about what Wagner may or may not do in your country?
You know, I think that this situation possible will weaken or even dismantle Wagner's in Belarus. And this is good news for our people and our neighbors, because we want every mercenary, Wagner mercenary and every Russian soldier to leave our country. And because Lukashenko's role as a deal broker and peacemaker compromised. But again, you know, Wagner groups can be used to provoke some incidents on the borders, just to provoke our neighbors. But I think this situation will dismantle Wagner's strength in our country.
And some of Ukrainian commentators, and I say this because obviously you have expressed very clear support for Ukraine in this war, what they say is that it also shows, or would show, that the Kremlin does not have a word. The deals they signed, they do not carry any worth, and that, again, this would show that any compromise at this point would be ill-fated. Is that something that you share, not just when it comes to Ukraine, but potentially your own country, that cutting deals potentially with the Kremlin, well, it has no value?
As I said before, you know, any deals with Putin or Lukashenko can be trustworthy. You know, it would be a lesson for everyone who thinks that Putin and Lukashenko can be trusted. You know, you can't make any deals with them. Time and again, they have violated agreements. They will wait for the right time when it is convenient for them, and then will break any agreement.
And as you say, you weren't surprised. But I wonder, in this power struggle that we've seen sometimes play out between Belarus and Russia, where do you believe this leaves your country? Is there a message to the elites of your country, just as there is a message, perhaps, to the elites of Russia, that there are lines that should not be crossed when it comes to Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, it was a message for Russian elites and Belarusian elites as well, that they can be the next. You know, that Putin will violate any laws, any agreements, just to punish everybody who cross his way.
And just as a final question, when it comes to the opposition that we've seen in your country, when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, do you believe that ultimately this is a message that the struggle should continue? Or actually, do you predict that perhaps there could be fear as you see that no one is safe? If you're in Belarus at this point, do you worry that perhaps it's also a message to the people that would be detrimental to your cause?
Now, I can speak on behalf of Belarusian people. This case for sure will not stop Belarusian people from fighting against a dictator in our country and Russian influence in Belarus. Because actually now Belarusians are facing dual crisis. On the one hand, the dictatorship of Lukashenko, on the other hand, loss of sovereignty to Russia. So Wagner may be weakened now, but Russian nuclear weapons and troops remain. And Lukashenko has proved that he can't make any deals. He's on Putin's leash, and he's only able to act freely when it comes to repressions and state terror in Belarus, which is in Putin's interest. And everything that happens in Belarus affects our neighbors. The only way to regional security is to free our people from Putin and Lukashenko. And of course, Belarusian people are not giving up in our fight.
Well, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg. And look, Tom, she makes it very clear. She doesn't see a coincidence here, but a pattern.
The opposition leader of Belarus being very clear, saying this is, in her view, an assassination. We don't have that proof yet, but she was clear in that answer. And you point to the fact that this raises questions about any deal-making between Ukraine and Russia. I was always very sceptical about the idea that Putin was a weakened leader on the back of this attempted coup by Wagner and Prigozhin. The reporting now from the team at Bloomberg, who have been quoting officials close to the Kremlin, saying this now shores up his leadership again. So maybe good news for Putin. I just think externally it looks very messy as well. I think officials in China, their partners, Russia's important partners in China, are going to be having their head in their hands because this is ugly, the way that this has all transpired. But at least for now, the reporting seems to suggest that this strengthens the hand of Putin.
And it's happening on the day of the BRICS summit, which again, we go back to that because the optics do matter. You have the BRICS, Russia there not able to participate, but also we just saw from the BRICS leaders saying we provide perhaps an alternative to other countries. Well, today, it's not a rosy picture.
Very fascinating in terms of the context, and a great interview. Maria Tadeo, of course, bring us all the latest on that and that interview with the opposition leader of Belarus with their reaction to the death of, the reported death, of course, of the Wagner leader. Coming up, shares of Nvidia higher after a blowout forecast amid fresh warnings on risks from a potential sales ban to China. More on that next. And later this hour, we're going to catch up with Jane Foley, head of FX strategy at Rabobank. Plus, Republican candidates waging attacks on President Joe Biden's policies at the first presidential debate of the 2024 race. We'll discuss the key takeaways later this hour.
Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. The disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, their war on energy, runaway spending that launched the worst inflation in 40 years, a crisis at our southern border, an assault on our values and liberties, and the American people have had enough.
We are grateful to our BRICS colleagues who are actively involved in trying to end the situation in Ukraine and achieve a just settlement through peaceful means.
Russian President Vladimir Putin speaking there over at the BRICS summit. Joining us now on the ground is Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabasajja. Jennifer, it's been a kind of tumultuous 24 hours for Russia at the moment. Talk to us about the on-the-ground conversation around the reported death of Evgeny Prigozhin.
Yeah, Kriti, I mean, I can't help but say that it was the talk of this morning, talking about Prigozhin's presumed death. But, you know, we didn't hear much from the leaders, particularly about this, just given sort of the complications of that situation and also what is happening on the ground, though. But we did hear from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Of course, he's not here in person, but he did speak virtually, as Maria was alluding to. He really doubled down on his idea and his hope that Russia plans to deepen its collaboration and its partnership with the African continent. He touched on the fact that Russia is in discussions with a number of African countries to support food security and to find a resolution to, of course, the grain deal that they pulled out of, but nothing specifically on the crash that we saw and was reported yesterday. But we did hear from Vladimir Putin for the first time since that was reported here on the ground at BRICS.
And Jen, BRICS extending the invite to other countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and others. Talk to us about the expansion.
Yes, Tom, this was really what we were all waiting to hear, and we did actually get all 5 leaders in the room earlier today talking about the official list of new members. So you mentioned a few of them. The official 6 members that were added, we have Iran, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, and also Ethiopia. And so this was a bit of a surprise to get this, because we heard there were a lot of negotiations about what other countries were added. We heard from Jim O'Neill earlier in the week talking about just how big a deal it would be to add Saudi. Now we see 5 other countries added, and the leaders are still just talking about how significant this is going to be potentially, and what they're all talking about is a multipolar world. And what they said is that they're open to adding more members. So they agreed on whatever the consent, or they have a consensus on the criteria for what it is to become a member of BRICS. At this point in time, though, these 6 countries will become new members as of January of 2024, more potentially to come, and a lot more announcements potentially from this BRICS summit. But this was the big news of the day here on the ground.
Something we are certainly watching closely. Bloomberg Jennifer Sabasaj reporting live from South Africa on that crucial BRICS summit. We thank you as always. From South Africa, we go back to Asia. Shares of Chinese seafood companies are jumping after the customs authority said the nation will suspend imports of aquatic products from Japan. This comes in response to Japan's plan to start releasing treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant into the Pacific Ocean starting today. Joining us now on the phone, Bloomberg's Stephen Stupczynski joining the program here. Stephen, you've been all over the story. You've already seen reports of hoarding when it comes to seafood and things like salt. Talk to us about the market read-through here, the commodities read-through of this very controversial move by Japan.
You know, I think that this is, you have to look at it in the lens of geopolitics, because China, for the longest time, has been banging the drum saying, please don't do this. We don't want this to happen. And now that Japan started today, the release, you're seeing that reaction. The reaction is probably a surprise maybe to the government, at least a surprise to some analysts that we spoke with, that China was going to stop imports of Japanese seafood. Now, China is the biggest market for Japan for seafood. They make up about $500 million of trade last year. And because of that, you're going to see, local seafood firms in China do better because their sales are going to obviously rise. You're likely going to see similar things with other seafood companies and stocks in other parts of the world. At the same time, there are threats that maybe this will disrupt other parts of trade. With seafood now, what's next? Could it be rare earths? Could it be other sorts of refined products from Japan? That's going to be on the thoughts of everyone going forward. But I think that this issue has become larger than just simply a water safety thing. Has become a supply chain and a trade problem. And it's something that the Japanese government is likely going to try to figure out a way to solve before it further spirals out of control.
Yeah, well, you have to wonder how they're going to solve that. But the Bloomberg reporting is suggesting they have to kind of leak this water into the oceans for about 30 years. So does China keep these measures in place for that long, I guess, is a question. What's next to look at in this kind of evolving story then, Stephen?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Fukushima disaster is going to require decades to kind of solve. But I think one thing to look at is whether the government levels, are they going to continue talks, and whether policymakers will keep going to the country.
OK, Stephen Stupczynski, thank you very much indeed for the latest on that story. Meanwhile, on technology, of course, this is the big one. It has been all week. The excitement has built over this. Nvidia coming out with stronger than expected sales forecast on robust AI demand, setting up its shares on track to hit a fresh record high. Look at the gains there, pre-market 8%. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Alex Webb. Alex, your first take then on these earnings and what it means for AI demand.
The demand is absolutely there. The numbers, both the quarter that just happened and the outlook for the upcoming quarter, were significant beats. They had said they expected to do 11 billion revenue in the most recent quarter. That was 50% above analyst expectations when they made that forecast. In fact, they beat that by even more. They were in excess of 13 billion. In the upcoming quarter, the analysts were looking for 12.5 billion for the outlook. It's going to be 16 billion, almost 30% higher than expectations. But crucially, the CEO Jensen Huang said they have the supply. They will have the supply heading into next year. There was concern that, even if there's lots of demand, are they going to be able to meet that with the capacity that the likes of TSMC and Samsung have? And he work very hard to assuage those
because
concerns.
they rely on TSMC, they rely on Samsung to get that
to
get
actually
those chips to
manufacture
market.
them.
Right,
Exactly.
And the buyback as well, 25 billion, just briefly.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's something that they can readily afford to do now. They are highly cash generative. 25 billion, though, in the scope of now $1.2, $1.3 trillion company is, is sort of a rounding error right now. But it is something that tech investors increasingly look for.
Brilliant. Alex, thank you very much indeed. Alex Webb, of course, Bloomberg Quick Take on those numbers out of Nvidia. Let's check in pre-market then on Nvidia stock. Last time we had it up, the board up is up more than 7%. It's giving a broader lift to the tech sector in Europe and Asia as well. And you expect the same thing to play out stateside. 8% gain there. Coming up, we're going to speak to Jane Foley, head of FX strategy at Rabobank. Her views on the pound, on the yuan, and of course on the greenback. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance, the early edition. Here's what you need to know. Nvidia soaring, the chip maker at the heart of the AI frenzy, giving a bullish revenue outlook, comes against stricter rules on exports to China that could hurt American companies in the long term. Evgeny Prigozhin, the man who led a mutiny posing the biggest threat to President Vladimir Putin's almost quarter-century rule, is presumed dead. Russian aviation authorities say he was in a plane crash yesterday that killed all 10 aboard. And in a debate last night, Republican presidential candidates were largely united in their criticism of President Joe Biden's economic record, but sparred over things like foreign policy, the border, and, of course, abortion rights. I'm Kriti Gupta in New York with Tom Mackenzie stepping in for Danny Berger in London. Tom, there's a lot to digest in the geopolitical context, but I got to say, Nvidia changing these markets.
It really is, and the lift for Nvidia is still here for European stocks. Even as the benchmark pairs some of the earlier gains of the session, we are still on track, at least at this point, for a fourth straight day of gains for European stocks, and Nvidia is certainly a big reason for that. Tech, one of the leading sectors so far, along with real estate, as yields continue to come in. Talking of yields, we have a move into, particularly pronounced in UK gilts, as markets continue to reassess just how far the BOE will need to go. The data out of the UK has been softer, so maybe the BOE won't be as aggressive as someone expected, and yields are coming in on UK debt. The gas story is really interesting as well. For a second straight day, you're doing double-digit downside for prices around natural gas futures in Europe. That after reports that maybe that strike action out of Australia affecting LNG is not going to come to pass. So a bit of relief in the gas markets, pressure on prices, good news when it comes to inflation. And when it comes to the tech story, just reflecting again on the sector here in Europe, getting a lift as well, up about 0.8%. It's not as direct, it's not as clear, the linkages between Nvidia as it is between some of their Asian counterparts. But we do have ASML listed here, Infineon and ST Micro. They're getting a bit of lift on this optimism around AI. Across the benchmark here in Europe, gains of 0.3%. Kriti.
Yeah, that green on the screen really translating into a global story. And I think you really saw this last night, the minute that futures opened at about 6 p.m. Futures higher now by about 0.4%, 44.66. But Tom, you said it, the outperformance is in the tech sector. You can see that in two ways. In the NASDAQ 100 futures higher by 1%. Although I will say in the last 30 minutes or so, you have seen some of those gains paired a little bit. So I wonder how much of the focus is shifting to the Jackson Hole story, and how much of the focus, by the way, is simply pairing a lot of those gains. Remember, a lot of folks had front run the rally you are now seeing. The Hang Seng as well hopping on that boat, closing about 2% of a rally, given that you have seen this massive exodus from that Chinese index. But again, when tech is in vogue, this is an index that outperforms, and today is no different, given really the entire world's equity market is in the green. The 10-year yield also worth checking, kind of unchanged on the day, but again, that is the wait and see approach for you when it comes to what we're going to hear from Jackson Hole. 418 on that yield, Tom.
418 on the 10-year, the wait-and-see approach, absolutely ahead of Jay Powell, of course. Talking of which, let's bring in for the FX view, Jane Foley, head of FX strategy at Rabobank, joining us here in the studio. Jane, thanks for joining us. Good morning. Let's start with the greenback then. How much is priced in ahead of this speech by Jay Powell?
Well, we have seen quite a lot of movement in the last couple of weeks, but, I'm worried that we've got further to go. And the reason for that is that when I look at positioning, for instance, in the euro, or positioning in sterling. I can't understand why the market is still so long. And I think the market's going through this rethink, really. It's only quite recently that the market's decided to believe the Fed and to believe the fact that there won't be an interest rate cut from the US by the end of the year. And that we've seen that coming through into the US dollar. But I suspect that there's further to go, because I think the market's going to be looking at the European data, the UK data, such as those PMIs that we saw this week, and think, why am I so long euro? Why am I so long sterling? Maybe I should rethink my dollar positions. That's interesting. Euro dollar, to your point, it's gone from what, 112 mid-July to kind of 108 today. Do you want to fade that kind of move from the euro? I think we've got further to go. It may not be totally straight line, but I mean, our 3-month call for a while now has been 108. So we were a little bit wrong for a while, but now, you know, it's coming in line. And that is because, you know, if we look, for instance, just at the European data, there's a lot of weakness in Germany. If we look at the exports in Germany, indeed, if we look through, you know, house building in Germany, if we look through construction sector, and if we look at what the Bundesbank is saying, that no growth again in the third quarter of the year. If we look at those PMIs, it really fits that story. And yet the market is positioned long. And now the market's going through this rethink about what the ECB can or may not do. And in fact, if we come to September, the market's beginning to think, oh, are they going to be able to hike interest rates in September? Is the economy already slowing enough? So I think there's a rethink still processing its way through the foreign exchange markets.
Jane, it's interesting that you mentioned it as a rethink, because I would argue, at least from this side of the Atlantic, it feels like the concept of recession has been completely thrown out the window, at least for the U.S. I want to argue for the rest of the year, but also in 2024, potentially, just given the resilience of the economy. You've seen some pretty interesting resilience in the UK and the EU as well, but I'm wondering to what extent the pain or the pullback you're now seeing specifically in the UK serves as some sort of canary in the coal mine for these other regions.
You know, I think you're right about the resilience. We can certainly talk about resilience in the UK market, but it's resilient compared with what was in the price at the end of last year. So, for instance, the Bank of England at the end of last year was forecasting a 5-quarter recession. Now, we haven't had that recession in the UK, and therefore the market, you know, started to build up its long sterling positions on that relief factor. But what have we got? Well, we've got stagnation. We've got high levels of CPI inflation, and we've got very low levels of growth. So there's not a lot to celebrate. So, you know, it's better than expected, more resilient than expected, certainly. Is it good data that we're seeing for the UK? Well, no. And actually, you can apply the same logic, really, the same sort of reasoning to Germany. Yes, it's much better than we thought we would be. This time last year, we were so worried about those high gas prices. We thought, you know, we were talking about deindustrialization for Germany, for instance. Then that seemed to go away at the end of the year as gas prices, you know, came off their highs. But actually, we're not looking at good data, and yet the market has these very long positions. Whereas in the US, the market is not long, and we're talking about far greater levels of resilience and better levels of growth.
Well, Jane, speaking of that resilience versus recovery debate, let's talk a little bit about these cross-asset correlations in the coming months as we get closer and closer to the winter. Does the pound, does the euro specifically start to get a little bit more exposed, perhaps, to what you're seeing in the commodity market, the natural gas volatility that you're seeing? Does it have a read-through into the FX market?
Well, it certainly could. I mean, you know, we are looking at oil prices that have been, you know, bubbling a little bit higher in the last couple of months. Now, of course, we've got, you know, the China headwinds, and the China headwinds could probably keep a lot of commodity prices a bit lower, and certainly food prices are lower again this year too. But in terms of, you know, slow down risks, if we're talking about, you know, well, China's slowing down, yes, that's going to spread through the commodity trade angle into many EM. It will spread into Germany through that trade route too. The US is far more resilient because the US is a relatively closed economy, so it's not going to get those sorts of headwinds again. So Europe will be feeling those sorts of headwinds more than certainly the US.
You're painting a picture of a very divergent world in terms of these major economies, and you touch on China, and rightly so, the linkages with Europe. I wonder, we've seen consistently this week, Jane, the fixing coming in stronger from the PBOC. Are they fighting a losing battle?
Yes, I would say so. But perhaps that's the wrong way to look at it, because, you know, they are fighting a battle, and you could say that they have had some measure of success. I think what they're trying to do is not necessarily turn that currency pair around, but to slow the pace of depreciation. In fact, I would say that's probably all that they can hope for at this stage. I mean, if we look back, through the decades, and we look at, say, dollar yen and intervention, say, in the Clinton years, when there was quite a bit of it. With the beauty of hindsight, when we look back at intervention, we can only say, oh, yeah, it was successful in turning it around if the fundamentals, with hindsight, were also turning around too. And there's nothing...
You needed that correlation.
You needed that correlation. That if we look at the data coming out of China right now, who can say, oh, yeah, it deserves a stronger renminbi? We can't say that. The data is too weak. And therefore, I think all they're trying to do is just slow the pace of depreciation.
Jane, a final question to you here. We're, of course, coming up on the comments we're going to hear out of Jackson Hole from Chairman Powell. What kind of market reaction do you expect on the back of that?
Well, of course, the market has been talking quite a while now about the higher for longer sort of themes. But, the title, the word structural is in that title. And I think that's the interesting thing. Are those central bankers going to be talking about another decade or two whereby we have structurally higher levels of inflation? Because if they are talking about that, and I think there's very good reason to have those sorts of debates, are they actually implying that 2% inflation targets may not be that appropriate? Maybe we should be starting to think about 3% inflation targets, because if we do have persistently high levels of core inflation for the next 2, 3, 4 years, that is going to be a big topic for the next decade or so, whether those inflation targets are slightly inappropriate.
It keeps reminding me of that call the Bank of America made of whether we are in a 5% world now, kind of pulling back from the ultra low interest rate environment that we've seen in the last decade or so. Rabobank's Jane Foley joining us on the program. We thank you as always. And we go from monetary policy to at least fiscal policy. That was one of the topics that came up last night when Republican presidential contenders faced off in their first debate of the primary season, minus frontrunner Donald Trump. We've got the key takeaways from the debate next. Stick with us. This is Bloomberg.
Joe Biden's Bidenomics has led to the loss of $10,000 of spending power for the average family. When you see 16% inflation, your gas is up 40%, your food is up 20%, your electricity is up 20%. We can stop that by turning the spigot off in Washington, sending the money back to the states.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott there, one of the many Republican candidates speaking last night at the first Republican presidential debate of the primary season. The candidates largely left an absent Donald Trump untouched at the debate. The 8 contenders instead attacked Joe Biden's economic stewardship. Joining us now, Bloomberg managing editor Derek Wallbank, all over this story. The benefit, I think, of being abroad is you get to see this debate live. Derek, I think going into this debate, the expectation was that Ron DeSantis would kind of be the focal point. That's not exactly how it played out, is it?
No, it's not at all how it played out. In fact, Ron DeSantis said what he wanted to, and they largely got left alone. Instead, all of the fire skipped also a reasonably skipped Donald Trump and went to a new guy on the scene, Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, Mr. Ramaswamy is new to the political scene. He's, by his own admission, only voted about twice before in presidential elections, and he's comes out of the business world. He has risen in the polls anyway, and that has proved, let's say, vexatious if you are former Vice President Mike Pence, if you are Nikki Haley, if you are Chris Christie, or any of the others who attacked Mr. Ramaswamy's record there. In fact, a super PAC backing Ron DeSantis is out now with a contrast spot that they whipped up during the debate over one of his gaffes, and all of that attention centered there shows, I think, where some of the threat is. Right, Mr. DeSantis's poll results have gone down over the last couple of months. Ramaswamy is on the way up. He's polling sort of tied second, maybe just barely third, depending on how you go. So there was a lot of focus on him. I think he came out actually rather well. He came out saying afterwards he came out better than he thought he was going to. Nikki Haley also had a good night. A lot of people in her line of the polling side will be looking for others to give them a chance. But look, I don't think that this resets the race in any possible way from the absolute largest view of it, which is that you've got Donald Trump, who's running 30, 40 points ahead of absolutely everybody else. And Donald Trump is going to today once again seize the spotlight because he's due in at the Fulton County Jail to be processed through, in that case in Georgia, later today, U.S. time.
So, Derek, you think President Trump, former President Trump, can be pretty relaxed at this point? Is there anyone who stood out? You talked about Vivek standing out in terms of a relatively new face. Is there anyone who is becoming closer to that challenge as the campaign around Ron DeSantis seems to be, at least on some measures, coming off the tracks?
Yeah, I think Haley is somebody, as I say, the former UN ambassador, a former governor of South Carolina, somebody who got some points in, somebody who is going to get people to take another look, right? If you are sitting there saying, I don't want Donald Trump to be the nominee, let's put yourself in a Republican mega donors position right now, and you're looking for another horse to back. Nikki Haley's somebody who comes with a record. She's somebody who has a little bit of distance from Trump, but also served in his administration. She's somebody who maybe gets another look there. I did hear some chatter around that some people want someone else who wasn't on the stage. That seems like a lot of wishful thinking to me. I think DeSantis has plenty of time, if you're looking at it, though, to turn this around. You're talking about a Florida governor, a guy who won an absolute wipeout in what used to be a swing state. In his last election, somebody with reasonably unimpeachable conservative credentials. He's got a lot of time. He's got a super PAC that's backing him that's got a fair bit of money. So I wouldn't write him off yet. I'm not going to be one of the people taking him to the political morgue right now. It wasn't a standout debate, but he didn't need to do what some other people needed to do. I will say people like Mike Pence, people like Chris Christie, who have had trouble on the Republican flank, probably not getting that other look again from Republican voters. Maybe some things that they said sounded better to consultants than they did to actual voters.
Not off yet to the political morgue. I like that one, Derek, for Ron DeSantis. The colour and the context, the analysis from Derek Wagner. Thank you on those Republican nominees and contenders, at least for the nomination. We're going to briefly check in on European markets. Nvidia is still a factor, of course, but fading the gains of the early part of the session here in Europe. You're now only up 0.1%. The drag coming through from basic resources, construction and autos. Real estate is the lead sector, again at just 1%. Technology, that lift for Nvidia, has faded as a sector, gaining just 0.6%. Talking of Nvidia, shares there continuing its rally after the second quarter earnings show strong chip demand, of course. We're going to dig deeper with the analysis from Bloomberg Intelligence. That is coming up. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance, the early edition. I'm Kriti Gupta in New York with Tom Mackenzie in London. Let's take a quick look at what's ahead today. Jackson Hole Economic Symposium kicking off in Wyoming. Plus, of course, U.S. initial jobless claims coming in at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, followed by Fed Speak from Boston Fed President Susan Collins over at 11:15, and retail earnings on deck with Nordstrom and Gap scheduled to report after the U.S. market close. Plenty of fodder for the bond market, plenty of fodder for the stock market, in addition to processing some of the stuff we've got out of Nvidia. Tom.
We have to go back there, don't we? We can't move on to Jay Powell quite yet. Nvidia still dominating the conversation, still dominating many of these moves across these markets. Shares for the company then set for a fresh record high after the chipmaker gave a revenue forecast that was much stronger than expected. Matt Bloxham from Bloomberg Intelligence joins us on set. And Matt, yesterday you flagged to us the potential vulnerability around the ability for this company to match the demand with the supply. You said you need to watch for this when the earnings come out. Are you convinced that they're okay on the supply front when demand remains so red hot?
Well, certainly the company's convinced, obviously that they outsource their supply, and there's a very clear message on the call yesterday that they're confident that supply will continue to expand quarter over quarter for the next, maybe 6-12 months. So the company's very confident that this kind of huge demand they're seeing from cloud service providers to upgrade their infrastructure for these AI chips can be met. So yeah, encouraging signs yesterday, and I think we saw that in the market reaction.
Matt, the problem with getting an A++ on any sort of report card is just how long you can sustain it. I know if I brought an A++ one quarter and then A- the next quarter, my parents would have had it out with me. What happens when Nvidia ultimately can't make an A++ earnings report?
Well, I guess that's going to be, if and when that comes, that time comes, I guess it's going to be, the focus is going to shift, like we've seen, for example, with something like Amazon or even Google and Meta, to the cost side. And that's kind of, as a management team, you have to be kind of carefully managing that transition so that even if your top line's slowing, from a growth perspective, your earnings growth can be sustained. I think, honestly, we're quite some way from that being a challenge that Nvidia has to think about. We heard yesterday them talk about $1 trillion cloud market opportunity, and that maybe annually about $250 billion of that is getting upgraded. That's the size of the data center market that potentially needs to shift to this new accelerated computing environment, as I describe it.
Matt, do you worry about their inability to fully access the China market?
I mean, it's definitely a concern, huge market. I think most investors will probably be factoring into their outlook for the company that it's never going to live up to the full potential that it could because of geopolitical tensions. I think directionally they're only going to get tougher rather than looser. So I think there is an issue there in terms of the total addressable market for Nvidia, but there's way enough demand in the rest of the world for them to kind of continue to grow at a very healthy rate.
Yeah, a surprise for the markets, and I'm sure for a lot of their investors as well. Bloomberg Intelligence's Matt Bloxham all over that story. Thank you, as always, for joining this morning. And, of course, let's get a quick check on those shares because, again, it is a rip-roaring rally for a lot of the chip sector. Nvidia shares higher by a pretty significant amount, almost 8% in just the pre-market trade. And that, of course, is having a read-through into its main competitor, Advanced Micro Devices, also higher by 2.5%. Interestingly enough, though, Intel unchanged on the day. So perhaps some nuance there in terms of the read-through. I want to put some other stock moves on your radar, Tom, if I can. Boeing down about 2% this morning. Remember, it's the heavyweight in the Dow and has a pretty substantial weighting in the S&P 500 as well. This comes after the 737 MAX starts to see some issues. They are concerned about a potential hole that affects cabin pressure, and this is, of course, going to affect their entire delivery target. Remember, Boeing has a massive backlog in terms of what they are ordering for a lot of their major clients. U.S. Steel also under pressure. The ticker is just the letter X there for our radio audience. Shares down about 3% this morning. We know there's been a hot, contentious bid for this company, unsolicited, I might add, between Cleveland-Cliffs and then S-Mark. It looks like in the last 24 hours, S-Mark has pulled out of that $7.8 billion offer to Tom simply because they said, look, the union seems to favor the Cleveland-Cliffs deal, and they want to respect that given they also work with the union associated.
Hey, I want to go back to Boeing. I don't know if you're into home renovation, Kriti, but I make damn sure I don't drill a hole in the wrong place when I'm trying to put up shelves at home. How are these guys drilling the wrong holes in pieces for aircraft?
Yeah.
Madness. Anyway, Kriti, thank you very much indeed. There's a lot more coming up, of course, Kriti.
There absolutely is. That does it for Early Edition. We're going to have live coverage, of course, from the Jackson Hole Summit, plus former St. Louis Fed President Jim Bullard joining Surveillance. Stick with us. This is Bloomberg.